limitless power, one with love and law. So today is an exploration of the foundation, the basics of our teaching, the principles, so that we can deepen in our faith, have a greater belief of those principles, and also to have a greater implementation, a greater expression in the very challenges and goals and aspects of our lives. You want that, don't you? Yes. Yes, we all do. So I'm Reverend Karen Russo. Some of you I'm meeting for the first time. And I'm like I've said this before, I'm like the surprisingly cool stepmom of the New Vision Center. So, yeah. So I am a minister of religious science, and I've been some part of the community for 15 years or more. And I felt my quality here today is, it is awe-inspiring to me to get a call that says, would I speak on the thing itself, the basics of the science of mind? Part of me wants to say we should call Chompies, because we're going to be here a while, because I've got a lot to say about it. Yeah, but I have, landed the plane with 20 minutes of the very best of this, one of the core aspects of our teaching. And for those of you that were here last week, Reverend Karen Lewis, our senior minister, did a beautiful job of creating the factual context. She talked about the roots of religious science, the science of mind, are embedded in ageless teachings. So teachings of the ancients, the indigenous people said, Mother Earth, Father Sky, there is a connection, we are one with it. And she also talked about the 100-year or so coming together of Ernest Holmes, the founder of the Science of Mind, and other teachers and speakers and authors that are considered new thought. So the last 100 years, there are denominations and practices and teachings like unity and divine science and Christian science and religious science, and we are part of that family. And what I so appreciate is Reverend Karen Lewis also covered the things that we're not. So, we're not a cult, we're not this, we're not that. But what we are is what we're going to be speaking about today. And I do find it helpful, and I encourage that, for each and every one of you. I heard someone say, beginning metaphysics is theory, advanced metaphysics is practice. So if you've heard this before, I invite you to not come from the place of like, gee, I've heard this, but more, to what extent am I actively practicing that love, God is all there is, and law, my consciousness, and all consciousness is creative. To what extent is that something that you are living is a great way to engage in this message. And, for the folks that are with us online, I encourage you, when I tune in and I'm on YouTube, I'm in the chat responding and sharing thoughts. So as you start to build what is your fresh worldview or cosmology of the science of mind, by all means, chat away. It's the same as if we're here together and you're smiling or nodding. So we love that. Okay, so why is this so important? Reverend Leslie Goodwin wrote in this week's newsletter, she said, when we are challenged and life is not appearing to us as we would like it to be, it is important to ask, what is our worldview? What are our fundamental beliefs? Because we are always experiencing life based on what our fundamental beliefs are, based on what the term is sometimes called cosmology, that each and every one of us has an individual idea about what is life and how it gets to be the way that it is, and we respond to life and we create life from that worldview. So, what is your cosmology? What is your belief about the nature of life itself is a good thing to be contemplating as you engage with this message. And it's also a fun time to remember, who you were when you first heard about this teaching. So I will give a little context. So it's 1993. I had a very cute perm. I was newly sober. I was terminally single. I was filled with a lot of resentment and a lot of concern that other people were not doing things the way they should. And I was wearing out this wonderful therapist, and I think she was Pacific Palisades. I would drive up, her beautiful house and sit in her kitchen. And one day, Marilyn just looked at me and she said, I think she was just exacerbated by my replay of things I didn't have and problems that were, really mild compared. Anyway, she said, I think you might enjoy this place on West Olympic called Agape. And so I said, sure, I'll go to Agape. So I walk in, and this is the 1990s, and Agape at the time was an exciting, thriving, trans-denominational church of religious science with a diverse and excited congregation. And I walk into this warehouse space, and the chairs were tiny. There were thousands of people, and I squeezed in next to a guy who had a fanny pack, 1993, had a fanny pack, and every time he was to move with the music or have an excited response to what was going on, I would get jostled. Now at the time, I did not want to be jostled, nor hugged, nor loved by all these cheerful people. And someone, they said, God is good, and everyone in the congregation responded with all the time. And I was like, I can enumerate all of the ways that things are not good, but I just heard them saying that. And then all I heard from whatever the speakers were these words: there is something in you that has never been hurt, harmed, nor endangered. And I heard it over and over again. My first thought was, these people are in denial. And then I started to wonder if it might be true. And the service completed, and Mr. Fanny Pack hugged me. I was like, oh. And I left, and I came back next week. And why did I come back? Because something in me did feel that I had been hurt, I had been harmed, I had been endangered, but it was not the complete truth of who I am. And so I was caught by the happy celebration of that possibility. And because I had the recovery background, I did what I had been taught to do, is I bought the book that they were all talking about, The Science of Mind. So this is my actual, the one that you do your homework in when we used to all read books on physical books. And what I did is I got the book, and on the inside of it, I started to write. 1993, I wrote the first class I took, the first friend I made, the first service I did in the nursery. And then over here, for those of you that are in practitioner training, I wrote my prayer demonstrations. So when you say a prayer and you have a shift in consciousness and you get a result, it's called a demonstration. So I wrote those down. So I started to study and I started to believe. And what I'm excited about is everything that I share with you here is from the chapter. There's 4 chapters in the introduction. The first one is called The Thing Itself. So we'll start with our first quote, if we could. Thank you, Rhonda and Linda. So the first thing that we want to say is, this is the simple meaning of a true metaphysical teaching: the study of life and the nature of the law, governed and directed by thought, always conscious that we live in a spiritual universe, that God is in, through, around, and for us. And so that last sentence feels really important. We live in a spiritual universe. God is in, through, around, and for us. And, Reverend Leslie said her mantra when she feels challenged is, God is all there is. For me, it's, I walk in the love of God. And it's nice to have like a shorthand way of saying it, but just this idea that there's a God that is in, through, around, and for us was a big revelation to me. So I'm going to speak about this idea of the oneness we have with the limitless from both a religious, a scientific, and a philosophic, because that's what the science of mind is. It's the correlation of the transcendent ideas of religion, the nature of our relationship with the divine. It's scientific in that there are laws that we can practice and prove, principles we can test, and it is philosophic in that it is how do we think about the nature of life itself? So all three things are useful. So this idea of God. So, you've probably heard, like humanity, we are made in the image and likeness of the divine, but sadly, we return the favor. So for many of you, you may have experienced the idea of being told that God was a, white, cisgender, heteronormative guy in the sky, like a different, separated being. And when that happens, sometimes we get the idea that God could be angry or displeased with us, or needs to be coveted or manipulated or pleased, or could be judgmental or could change. And if that humanized idea of God continues, some of us will say, this is just like my first spouse or a bad boss or a mean parent. And that creates a sense of separation. And here we are coming from a teaching that says God is not a being off in the sky, but God is the presence of all being. God is an infinite, eternal, unconditioned source of all, including love and abundance and peace and grace and truth and beauty, that God is eternal, does not change, and because God is all there is, can be personal to each of us. One of the things you'll see in the Science of Mind textbook, and I resisted this, of course, it's like it's written in kind of a patriarchal tone, and the sentences seem very long, and, I had some of that. And then you'll also hear the part that's inviting, that says God can be mind or spirit, first cause, intelligence, many different names. And one of the quotes that I just love about the nature of God is this: mind, the thing, spirit, causation, is beyond and yet not beyond our grasp. Beyond in that it is so big, within is in that whenever we grasp at it, we are it, to the extent that we grasp it. But since it is infinite, we can never encompass it. We shall never encompass God, yet we shall always be in God and of God. So that little phrasing, God is all that I am, but I am not all that God is, begins also the beautiful paradox of a mature spiritual philosophy. And that paradox is, it's already done, whole, perfect, complete, and yet, because of its infinite nature, there is always more to what? Be revealed. And that, for someone with a, sadly strong intellect, was a relief, because divine, God, spirit, source, was greater than my best intellectual education or ideas. That can be a great relief. So that God is more than this became an opening of mature exploration. And the final thing I'll say about the religious nature of God is that across all the world's religious traditions, there are mystical aspects to be respected and studied, because they too say some version of "thou art that," the Hindus would say. Or the Gnostics from the Christians would say God is through knowing. Or the Sufis, which are the Muslim or Islamic mystics. Or the Kabbalah from the Jewish tradition. So one of the reasons that you'll never hear me talk about being a recovered this or denigrating any religious tradition is that I want to respect and learn from and invite those from religious traditions to find in these teachings what can be helpful. There was a time when it used to be Dr. Ernest Holmes in the 1950s was doing lectures in the afternoons, Sundays afternoons, because people would go to their spiritual centers or churches in the mornings and come in the afternoon to lectures on these teachings. And it used to be that religious science ministers would say, if you're a Catholic, we'll make you a better Catholic. If you're a Baptist, we'll make you a better Baptist. And today we could say, if you're a fill in the blank, Baha'i, Wiccan, agnostic, we'll make you better, because we're going to offer you new things, tools and principles that can be helpful. And an infinite God can be personal. So I never want to lose for myself. There's called three faces of God. God is everything, God is within, and the I-thou relationship. So in an infinite universe, there is a God that is not so much a person, but is personal to me. I find it helpful, and you'll see Dr. Ernest Holmes' meditations are very much that an evolved soul is a worshiper of God. And if you want to use your primary word as another word, some of you will remember practitioner Suzanne Musa, who was a member of this community, and she would always say, sweet spirit. And believe me, when you heard her say that, you knew she was talking about a divine that is personal to her. Okay. So there's a thing, it's great, it's you, it's personal to you, and it's also lawful. So we are one with love and law. So we're going to show the metaphysical teaching symbol here, which is our Science of Mind chart. And you'll see that there's a circle, which represents the infinite, eternal nature of the divine. Some of you know Bill Sneed, who's our practitioner today, is my beloved big fella. And he sort of was speaking and sharing with me about the now nature of God. And the circle represents that. No beginning and no end. Where is the divine? It's in now. I will tell you, when I came upon this teaching, I had a load of the past and worry about the future. And this teaching has brought me into now, present moment. So that's what we're one with the love. And that V in the center is a representation of the law, which is the idea that consciousness acted upon by law creates experience. So consciousness creates. And you heard Reverend Glenn sing about the Trinity. In our metaphysical chart, you see the top is spirit, first cause. It's the one with the eternal. The middle represents the law of mind and action, that which reflects back to us what we put into it. And then the bottom is the body, which is circumstances, effects. And you might think seed, soil, plant. And in the coming weeks, the ministers and Reverend Laurie and others will be sharing more about, how the law works and how we can engage with it. But it's just important to feel and remember that our nature is lawful, as well as this happening on a macro universal level, it's true for us. Dr. Holmes writes, man, or us, humanity, has at his disposal, in what he calls his subjective mind, a power that seems to be limitless. This is because we are one with the whole on the subjective side of life. Man's thought, our thought, falling into his subjective mind, merges with the universal subjective mind and becomes the law of his life through the one great law of all life. And you may not get all those pieces, but the aspect of this is we are one with a limitless, lawful universe. So what that means is, regardless of our attitudes, circumstances, demographics, history, the sun rises and sets on the just and the unjust. Each of us has at our command the capacity to change our experience of life through a scientific process. It is an opening for the potential of freedom. Okay. And then the final reminder of us being one with the limitless power is the philosophic engagement, and it's right here in this first chapter of the book, with why do we suffer? Because we do suffer as human beings, and sometimes individually, sometimes collectively. Why is that so? And, in some teachings, the relief valve for why is there evil becomes kind of behavioral. Like, if you can have good behavior here, you can escape from the pain and suffering in a later time. Now, I came to the teaching with, I had a lot of bad behavior, and I had internalized it into a feeling of badness or wrongness. Maybe there's something wrong with me, is my deep core wound. You know, something's wrong with me, so why am I trying so hard to be a good girl? And the relief that came was not a comfort relief when I came here. It was an understanding that my bad behavior had punished me through consequence, but that I had the free will and the responsibility to create individually a life that was in alignment with my higher truth, and that if I wanted to contribute to the whole, it's ironic, isn't it? But it's like, to contribute to the whole, we need to be in alignment with what is true. Otherwise, we're just bringing anger and fear and judgment to the things we're trying to shift or change. So this is, we would really need Chompies to go into this deep, but I will read one statement about the nature of why do we suffer from this beautiful chapter. So Dr. Holmes writes, "There is a power in the universe that honors our faith in it. There is a law in the universe which exacts the uttermost farthing. We all wish to feel that the power behind everything is good as well as creative, an eternal and changeless intelligence in which we live, move, and have being. Intuitively, we sense that every man, everyone, in his native state is some part or manifestation of this eternal principle, and that the entire problem of limitation, evil, suffering, and uncertainty is not God-ordained, but is the result of ignorance." So this is the beginning of why is there suffering? I always say I have like three answers. One is ignorance or separation. We suffer when we stand in the shadow. The light is still there, but if we're separated from the truth, we suffer, and we may create suffering for others, some that is horrific. Ignorance. The second context, and we got to be in a place of maturity about this, is that sometimes we do not know the whole picture of creation. So I can say personally that some of the most brutal and horrific things of my own life turned out to be, you know, in the hands of the divine, the greatest gifts, because they led me to something greater. Not a divine trying to teach me lessons, but a larger context that proves something different. And I can apply that if I see someone suffering. You know, when I said these people are in denial, my big trigger thing was if a child was harmed. Why? Because I had been a child that was harmed, of course, right? But I got to a place where I really could see that every being is a fully evolved soul and maybe having a horrific human experience, but I cannot know the full story of their experience. Like there was something in like I didn't lack compassion, but I let go of my hopelessness. And that's how I feel about the world today. I'm sure you and I and all of us can find things in this human experience that, goodness, seem they could get, like, that we have real stuff, real challenges. And yet, I'm working with, if I am to be making phone calls or getting active or doing something, let me do it from a place of remembering the good of the divine and then bringing a healing to that particular area. And then I will say the third answer to why is there evil, why is there suffering, is I don't know. In that I don't know what your answer is. I have great respect for each individual discovering your own sincere experience, so that when you hear God is good, you would sincerely say, all the time. All right. Yes, yes. And so finally, what does this mean for us? It means we have work to do. And so our final quote that we'll use on the slides here is, we do not create the laws and principles, but we discover and make use of them. So this is the, you'll sometimes hear, humanity does not create it, but we discover it. And that sweetness of discovery, that's really, like, if I was to say what's the best verb for teaching the science of mind, discover is a good verb. Because we're not saying if you do these 10 things, you'll have this outcome. We're saying, please discover that what you hold in consciousness, when it is true with the truth of your being, will create that. Experiment, see what you find. Yeah. You are precious, and you've got, so do I, we all have some work to do. And the good news that I would tell to that gal that I was years ago, decades ago, that I would say to each and every one of you, to those that are with us, when we learn to trust the universe, we shall be happy, prosperous, and well. We must learn to come under that divine government and accept the fact that nature's table is ever filled. Never was there a cosmic famine. The finite alone has wrought and suffered, the infinite lies stretched in smiling repose. God is always God. No matter what our emotional storm, what our objective situation may be, there is always something hidden in the inner being that has never been violated. So there it was here, something in me, never hurt, harmed, or endangered. We may stumble, but always there is that eternal voice forever whispering within our ear, that which causes the eternal quest, that thing which forever sings and sings. That thing is you, that thing is me, that thing is us, that is the thing itself. So let us pray about that together. Yes. And so I invite the ministers and practitioners in training to rise up physically in your living rooms or here in the on campus. Rise up, all of us, to soften the eye, open the heart, expand the spirit. Let us pray. So how good it is to recognize that the infinite, eternal, changeless nature of life, God's spirit truth, is a here, now reality. And I rise up to the highest vibration to remember that God is all there is, that the universal presence is in, through, around, and for us. And this includes the us that is all. So every being, everyone is included as we rise up together to recognize the truth. And in this unified state of consciousness, I speak the word. What I claim and accept is that there is a deepening of wholeness, that the revelation of wholeness is a healing balm to all who are called for healing. I claim for us an expansion of love, compassion, peace, justice, so that the places that are broken are made straight by the right of consciousness. I accept that where there is challenge, there flows abundance, right action, truth, beauty, freedom, grace, that the qualities of the divine needed for every situation are inherent in this prayerful yes. And I am grateful that this prayer is a blessing to brothers and sisters and family and friends of all religious and faith traditions. We respect, love, and honor those who turn to the divine. And with a grateful heart, I know that all who have reached out for prayer, the answer is yes. We are grateful for the law. I trust that as it is spoken, it is done. We release, the prayer is answered. We let go, we let God, and together we say, and so it is.